of such policy. And so therefore, a company you're all familiar with, Employers Mutual Company, was started by the members of ABI to work on their workers' comp issues. So then they were off and running and understanding that they needed to be working on public policy. And so they've done that. Go ahead, Brad. A little bit about who we represent. Of course, our biggest core, because of our founding, is manufacturing. But in the 1980s, ABI was opened up to financial services and other businesses. This was in response to the determination in the state of Iowa through some reflection during the farm crisis that we really needed to be focused on diversifying our economy to make sure that we could weather downturns in specific parts of the economy so that we could keep Iowa moving forward. So we've added a lot of financial services. Financial services manufacturing are over half our membership. But we do have other themes in our membership with construction, education, training, and interestingly, other associations will join ABI. Now, that's because we try to take the lead on those general business and employment issues like unemployment, like workers' comp that I mentioned before, to provide those services for even the other associations. When we're at the Capitol, Brad and I will try to stress what ABI looks like. And if you look at the two largest pieces of the pie here, you'll see that almost two-thirds of ABI's membership are smaller organizations with 100 or fewer employees. That really dispels the idea that ABI is the big business lobby. And we make sure to drive that home because the typical ABI member is that smaller size. It is located not necessarily in the metro areas, but in suburban and exurban areas. So really kind of getting into the urban-rural flavor of Iowa.
Thank you very much, JD. And here's a look at today's agenda. We are going to start off with a legislative update from State Representative Bill Gustav of Des Moines. He is the House Ethics Chair, and he's a strong supporter of ABI issues and a good friend to the business community. So we're looking forward to hearing his perspective on the 2025 legislative session, some of his priorities for that year, and then kind of a sneak peek at what he thinks will be considered in 2026, what might rise to the top of discussions that will happen as we move towards that year. Following that, we are going to recap the four biggest issues. JD Davis and I will do that from the 2025 legislative session, kind of the status of those issues, how they are impacting businesses right now. And then we are going to move into the public policy process following that. And this is where we want your feedback. We want to know what we can be working on for you, the business community. We've made significant strides over the last several years, but we want to know what is still on your docket for wanting to be accomplished at the Capitol. So that is the agenda. And I have the pleasure of introducing State Representative Bill Gustav again, who's with us today, kind enough to take time with us. He represents House District 40, which is located in Polk County and includes parts of Ankeny, Des Moines, and Altoona. He is in his second term as an Iowa House member, and he does chair the Ethics Committee. He floor managed a key ABI priority in 2023, the Commercial Motor Vehicle Tort Reform Bill. That was critical to enhancing our legal climate for those in that industry, and we appreciate his leadership there. He's a small business owner, he's an attorney, he's somebody that his caucus looks to on a variety of issues, and so he's been a good friend of ABI, and we're pleased to have him with us today. So now I'm going to turn it over to you, Bill.
I don't think I have to say anything else after that intro, Brad. So, so um, no, thanks. I love ABI. I mean, I'm getting nothing for this, so I'll just say I think ABI is one of the most effective advocacy organizations at the Capitol. They're one of the ones I go to. Um, and JD and Brad sit at the strategic table outside where my little cubicle office is in the Capitol. So I really can't get in the Capitol without seeing them every day when I walk in there, which is good because they're people I'm often looking to seek out and get perspective on issues. They're very patient. You kind of covered my district, so all of Altoona, a little bit of Southern Ankeny. I'm almost a lifelong Iowan. I'm born here, raised here. Uh, Broke out a couple times to spend a little time in Omaha, a little time in the Chicago area. My wife hated that, so we are we are Iowans, committed Iowans. Our family's here. It's a great place to raise a family. It's a great place to do business. And I'm a small businessman, part of a small law firm that I helped found 15 years ago with Matt Whitaker and Chris Hagenow, who are also both very politically active. We've had other political active folks in our firm. Brenna Bird was part of our firm at one point, and Jack Whitford is still affiliated with our firm. So we're folks who formed a firm because we wanted to be able to, yeah, make a buck, but we really wanted to make a difference. And so we have a platform that lets us do those kinds of things. And I love digging into the business issues. And one of the issues I'll talk about, in fact, our majority leader, who's Matt Winchell, the PBM bill that came up at the end of the session. I'll touch on it here in a second, but I got pulled into that at the end at the behest of people like ABI at the end of the session. And I know I was talking with Matt Winchell, who wanted to hear what I was working on and what we were proposing, and then in the end he said, "Now, how did you get?" Yeah, how'd you get in the middle of this? Why are you suddenly at the end of this, in the middle of this sort of thing? And I said, well, I'm a small businessman. I'm a small business attorney, and the business community's worked with me on issues. They know I like to dig into issues, and I actually geek out on some of these things, and they're very patient in explaining it to me over and over until I can understand a complex issue like that one. I said, and then Matt, if you got your little black light and shine on my forehead, it says sucker right here. So I'm just willing to step up and dig into some of these things, and I'm glad I did. But that's kind of so I'm a judiciary, makes sense. As an attorney, I'm on public safety. I'm on the appropriations committee. I'm on a subcommittee on the infrastructure things that we deal with in the state that fund like highways and different big projects in the state. And then I'm chair of the ethics committee. And somebody asked me after session what a highlight of session was. And it said, it's oddly enough, I said, of the 3 years I've been in the session, I'm in my mid-year, my first year of my second term. And I said the highlight was actually chairing one ethics committee this year that was some people that neither party likes very much that had an ethics complaint, and they just kind of made a good circus for us. And so it wasn't necessarily effective or productive, but it was kind of a fun diversion for us up there. But otherwise, I just enjoy digging in and being of use. And that's part of the reason people say, how long will I do this sort of thing? I said, well, as long as I feel like it's a calling that I can do something, two, that I'm actually doing something worthwhile and productive, not just filling some seat. And three is, as long as most days I can say I enjoy it. And so far, those three have all lined up and continue to do so. So I'm hoping to be there and be helpful for some time to come. Well, we take it one session at a time. I've committed to running next year again. I haven't committed to anything beyond that, and I haven't even pulled the trigger fully to commit to that. But I'm in. I've got my wife at 96% in. She's got to get to 100. But I would say right at the end of session, she was only 60% in that this was a good idea to do it again. So we've made progress. Yeah, and you already hit on some of the key things, Brad. That I as a freshman, I got to handle tort reform in the state as a floor manager of a bill. So, and I did the math. Again, I like to dig in on bills. So, first term I was in both judiciary and education, which are, as a policy committee, get the two most bills of any committees, and so it was kind of crazy. And I look back at that first term, and I was assigned as the floor manager of 39 bills, which put me number two in the House to Brian Losey, who's just finished his third or fourth term, or he's in the middle of his fourth term. And so I felt pretty good about that, but I also explained why I felt a little crazy, because I'm a small business person whose job doesn't get set aside. And so I'm taking business trips, doing work, everything during session. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm being used up there. And as long as that continues and I feel like I'm being used and useful, I plan to continue doing it until I feel otherwise. Kind of a assessment of the last term. I think we've seen some success, especially from a business agenda. We've lowered taxes on businesses and individuals. We've made government smaller. The governor actually lowering from 37 agencies reporting to her down to 16 agencies. She ordered regulatory reform, so we're scaling back regulations. That's a big one on my agenda constantly. As a former advocate and lobbyist, I did as a hobby volunteer part-time thing. I knew the real danger came not only after the legislature was done, but watching the regulatory agencies and the rules they'd promulgate. So I've asked I've asked twice to be on Administrative Rules Review Committee, which nobody asked to be on that committee. I don't understand it. Like they haven't put me on it yet, but I would be one of those legislators saying, and so exactly where is this in the law that we passed that you're making this rule? So I really don't like administrators making law and making policy decisions. They're supposed to implement them, and I get they have to fill in some gaps, but that's a big one on my agenda to watch. Um, and not so directly related to business, but uh forgetting the name, what you guys when you guys do your big sit down with all the businesses, uh that hot seat you put us on. um
Epic.
Epic.
Epic, yes, sorry. So I remember the first one I did that in 2022, first election, and one of the things I got put on the spot and they asked about is what I was hearing at the different doors, because I literally knock thousands of doors personally each election year, and I'll probably knock in the neighborhood of 1,000 this year in an off year in my district. And I was hearing a lot of the pushback on things, and my wife said, "You went and said that at a business thing?" I said, "Well, they asked, and that's what the answer was." But it went well because they said asked why that is. They said, well, people are tired of being told they're bad people because they love their country, they love their families. We're seeing that in businesses too. I think businesses got tired of that too because they felt like they're pushed into things that. So, we're working on that. I'm not on the committees that are doing a lot of that, I guess necessarily. Judiciary does, but so those are kind of big ones. As I said, I think business has fared well under the legislature. But one of the dangers we have with a supermajority, we call it, we have 67 in the House and 36 in the Senate. Um, and frankly, one of the dangers of that is what I would call mission creep. Uh, and so, what happens in caucus is confidential. But I'll say I'm one of those voices in our caucus, occasionally saying to my own caucus members, well, why are we trying to regulate this? It's amazing how many of my colleagues, and I have to watch this too, we get a burr under our saddle about something, and suddenly we need a law, right? I'm like, no, we don't need a law about that. Yeah, life is messy, and so not a business issue necessarily. My wife and I were driving around Easter over to Eastern Iowa to go see our family, and somebody was plugging up the left lane on the 4-lane highway on Highway 30, and I had to go run them on the right. It was right during session when I was just dealing with that kind of concept. And I looked at my wife and son as we passed. I said, that annoys the crap out of me, but we do not need a law about that because I'm pissed off that somebody plugged up the left lane, right? It's discourteous. Yes, it's all kinds of things. But just because I get ticked off or a constituent gets kicked off, one of my colleagues get kicked off, we don't need a law for everything, really. So I'm more kind of I guess I call myself I come from the spectrum of the party that an evangelical conservatarian, right? I'm a conservative with a libertarian streak. Like, just leave us alone and let us run our lives and run our businesses. So that's kind of philosophy. But issues we worked on this year, um, you know, uh, some big ones. I was glad to see that the drug testing bill that got passed, the House File 767. Uh, as an attorney, I appreciated the arguments that were, again, Brad and JD were in particular were helpful explaining that to me. Just it's all about the burden shift that once you've made your prima facie case, it shouldn't remain a burden of the employer to prove all of the elements about that somebody's using drugs or something at work. So I was glad to see that bill pass and help businesses be able to get control of their place, because you bear the liabilities and the risks. So you should be able to control that in your business environments. Unemployment insurance, that was a big one for the governor. I'm glad we got that one across the line. We don't need $1 billion sitting in escrow, so to speak, sitting idle because of it was one of the largest. I don't know if it was the largest. It was the largest in the states around us anyway. I think our surplus there. I think we were like in the top 5 in the country on the surpluses we had there. So
Mhm.
this is not taking any money from anybody who's is entitled to unemployment. The unemployment system is sound. It was more than sound. That was part of the analysis there. And so that was all part of letting businesses have access to this cash instead of tying it up on a rainy day fund that might never be used. So our unemployment system is sound. The actuaries, the real eggheads are smarter than I am, have run the numbers and showed us that they're sound. And so that was a good one to get past. And then toward the end, I mentioned this. I got pulled into the so-called PBM reform, pharmacy benefit manager. Now, I'm no big defender of pharmacy benefit managers. Let's make that clear. Uh, I think they have their problems. I think they serve a purpose, but they really were kind of more of a federal creation. So we have this patchwork now of states trying to pass laws to deal with the middleman, the pharmacy benefit managers, and it really needs probably a federal fix. We thought we were going to get that, but they pulled back on doing that. So we'll see if that comes again. But we did pass the bill, and I say so-called PBM reform because it really wasn't the biggest issue of the bill. And I don't think that two of the main elements of the so-called reform, I don't think reformed it at all. It took part of the pricing structures like the spread pricing on drugs that would be part of the PBMs would keep part of that in some cases to help their compensation. So we said, no, we're going to pass 100% of these things through now, and ostensibly to reduce premiums. They kept rolling out West Virginia as their poster child. And we have the facts now to show that West Virginia wasn't quite the poster child they thought it was. In fact, West Virginia either had or is about to have a special legislative session to deal with rising public employee healthcare costs because the PBM reform that our law was patterned on didn't work there. So that was the big one. And I just don't think taking away this shared price savings mechanisms that they had improves the system, because PBMs are still going to be paid. Now they're just going to have to be paid out of another source. So we raise the cost of PBMs but that's that simple small business analysis. One of the lobbyists working on it, I sat in a room with these two fellows and about 20 other people one time, just trying to get educated on this, and told them they need to get out their crayons and draw me a picture sometimes on this because it was very complicated. I just don't think that reforms. But to me, the biggest thing that I objected to it, and I objected to this concept 3 years now in session, was this idea of a dispensing fee to help small and independent rural pharmacies. And by the way, guys, if I'm getting off track on what you talk about, just call me to task. All right. So, because I can really geek out on this stuff, right? So the $10.68 dispensing fee that would be added to every script written in the original bill was proposed was that would have been every script in the state of Iowa. Whether you're CVS and Walgreens and Costco and Walmart, or whether you're grocery store in our state that's the largest domestic pharmacy now, or whether you're Medicap that's on just north of the Capitol on 14th Street. So every script that would be written. And there was just a lot of confusion on there. There's still a lot of confusion about that. And we went round and round in caucus. I had to dig into this issue deep in our caucus twice. And this is where it was very helpful to have people who knew the issue. It helped me distill it down. I said, I need a very simple explanation here. And the explanation that we came up with, because we're state employees at the legislature, so a lot of us run the state health plan. So I was able to use an example and say $10.68, because some were arguing in our caucus that, well, this isn't paid by the consumer. It's paid by the PBMs, and it's not paid by the plan provider, the businesses. And I was shocked at the lack of understanding of just kind of basic economics and business, even in my own caucus on this. And so I went through a pedantic example, and I said, okay, so I have a child with an infection, and I go to the doctor and I get my amoxicillin, which is cheap now, generic amoxicillin. Maybe it's $5 for a prescription. And let's say I have one of those Wellmark healthcare plans like I do through the state. And let's say I have a $20 copay on my medications, which I do, which most of the people sitting in my caucus did as well. I said, that means right now I go pay $5 for my amoxicillin to get my kid well, and it doesn't hit the $20. So I pay it. I pay the full drug cost. That's the current one. If it's instead he's really sick and he needs a $50 Z-Pack, well then yes, I pay $20 copay, and my plan provider, in my case the state, thank you taxpayers, or in your cases, you businesses, or we even have the labor unions involved with us on this. And, it was an unusual alignment of businesses, large and small, labor unions, insurance companies, medical, it was an interesting coalition that came together on this. And I said, well, in that case, the plan provider's picking up that extra $30. And so when they were trying to argue that that dispensing fee didn't apply, wouldn't be paid by the consumer, I said, absolutely. If I've got 3 sick kids and I go buy 3 amoxicillins, my prescriptions just went up 1068 times 3, which is $21 and some change. Yes, my out of pocket just went up. That's what my voters, when I knock their doors, that's what grandma's going to know about all her prescriptions is that if they were below her copay, they went up $10.68. I raised her medical expenses. And if it's a bigger prescription, yeah, right. I don't see that right out of pocket. I'm paying my $20 copay, but my plan provider, the businesses, are picking up that differences. And of course, we know all businesses. We know that when you have increased costs, you all just absorb those. You don't pass those on at all. That's what business is all about. Is you're just there to be a charity handing out money and resources. And so I was shocked at the lack of the ability to understand this. And they're like, well, but that might be offset by the premium savings from this pass through some PBMs. So that's a big might. It might, but we're seeing your poster child in West Virginia. That's not necessarily happening. So that was kind of the distill it down. That's about as distilled down as I think I can get that issue. But I needed that very simple thing. And on that bill, I'm sure a lot of my own caucus doesn't know this yet, but it's the first time I went and sat and had a one-on-one with the governor and urged a veto of a bill. Because that bill passed 75-15 in the House. It passed 36-14 in the Senate. And before I go to where the bill went, the amendment that was brought to me by ABI and the unions and Wellmark and all these different things. And some of the arguments we get there was like, oh, well, Wellmark, we can't trust them. So I just kind of make jokes, sorry, at the expense of my friends here. I make jokes in caucus like, okay, yeah, you know what? Let's assume that Wellmark's a big liar on this. But at this point, I think everybody's lying to me on this issue. So this liar over here told me this, but at least they gave me numbers. These liars over there aren't giving me numbers. So just kind of sometimes you have to just kind of disarm those arguments with people. It's hard to understand. And I don't think everybody's lying. I think they're just trying to look at the numbers differently. And so the amendment we tried to pass, I had what we call a strike amendment. Would have stricken out all the language of the bill and replaced it with basically a new bill. And we were blamed for trying to kill the bill because the Senate passed it. And if we sent it back to the Senate, some over there were saying, well, we won't take it up. PBM reform will be dead for the year. And I said, yeah, I call baloney on that one because I talked with several senators, including leadership in the Senate. And while they weren't going out publicly and saying that, I was getting we're not likely to kill that if that's how it comes back. So that was baloney. The bill would have passed, but that was not the messaging being done. That was sure not the messaging being done by somebody who gave my text number to every pharmacist in the state and had them texting me the last 2 days I was in session, telling me how I didn't like small pharmacies and small businesses and I was going to blow up the bill. But so the main thing is it would have taken out some of the more obnoxious pieces of the bill. In fact, if you look at the Des Moines Register article on this, I'm not a big defender of the Des Moines Register, but when they wrote this law has now been enjoined. And so it's enjoined until a lawsuit that ABI and others brought is resolved. And it's partially enjoined. It's kind of messy, but if you look at the bullet points on there of the things that Judge Rose, a Democrat Clinton appointee, so this is not Obama appointee, so this is not a partisan Republican Democrat issue. The bullet points of the things she enjoined, with the exception of the dispensing fee, would have all been covered by the bill that I and ABI and that coalition proposed. We addressed all the issues that she said violate law, and all the issues that she upheld in the bullet point said we're going to leave these pieces intact. We left intact. So we left those key pieces intact. So why would it have made a difference if we passed mine on an injunction? Because the dispensing fee she still is ruled is not legal, not likely legal, at least under the injunction. And we would have left a dispensing fee of a different level in place. And the reason it would have survived is because there wouldn't have been a lawsuit. All the plaintiffs involved in the lawsuit were part of the trying to make the deal. They were like me. I think that's part of the reason they came to me on is I don't like this dispensing fee idea. Taking money from one segment of the population and giving it to another because we're worried about supposedly helping a certain business model survive or a certain type of business survive in certain communities, because I think that's a slippery slope. Not long after the bill was signed in Dallas, Iowa, they're losing their only convenience store. So I texted some of these folks, including JD and Brad. Hey, I think we need a cigarette and beer dispensing fee in small towns in Iowa because they're losing their convenience stores. And for that matter, we can't get lawyers to go to small towns and communities. So I think I need a legal services dispensing fee. Just it's a slippery slope as to where does it end. Just to help this business or that business. But nonetheless, I was willing to swallow what I think is not great policy. To their credit, ABI and its members and NFIB and all the unions and those, they were willing to swallow a smaller size dispensing fee if that's what it took, just to kind of get the Bankers Association was part of this. So again, a wide coalition of people. But our dispensing fee would have when it came from the Senate, they took out all the big players except it left in only pharmacies would qualify if they operate in 8 or fewer states. Well, that meant one big grocery store here that's really now a pharmacy, still masquerading as a grocery store in some ways. So that's what that meant. And I did the math on that, given their share of the dispensing fees. That was going to be a $60 million windfall by my math to that one particular grocery store pharmacy in the state of Iowa. They were not small pharmacies, because that was the news. If you watch the news like I did the last couple weeks of session, it seemed like every other night there was a story about how the small pharmacies were failing, the independent pharmacies were failing, and it's all PBM's fault, and we need to preserve the small pharmacies. So the bill we proposed would have said, okay, let's make this about small pharmacies. And we'll call, I hate the word, we use the word desert for everything, but pharmacy deserts, right? You're out in Dallas City, Iowa, and there's no pharmacy around. Or if there is, it's a big pharmacy, and it wouldn't necessarily qualify as small. So we said, okay, for the pharmacy deserts, regardless of your size, and this would have frankly included a CVS if they want to come in and open up in Dallas City, or as long as they were within 10 miles of another pharmacy, they would have qualified for a dispensing fee of $10.68. And then otherwise, if they were independent or small, and let me tell you, this is the first time I've seen small defined this way, but this is what I thought the business community came up and was willing to step up and do this. We defined a small pharmacy as if you didn't make more than $250 million, that's B, more than $250 million a year, you were a small business that could get a dispensing fee. I thought that was pretty generous, but it didn't include one particular big chain in Iowa that also happens to operate the biggest PBM in the state of Iowa itself. So that's where the fight really came in, and that's where people dug in their heels, and that's where they said we were trying to kill the bill, and they passed their bill. And when I sat with the governor and talked to her, I went through. I said, "Well, I'm sure you in your office heard I was being a spoiler at the end of session, trying to blow up this bill. Here's what I was doing. Here's what I wasn't doing." She and I are friends, and she understood what I was trying to do. I was trying to make the pitch that you may want to consider vetoing this to get it right sized. And plus, I said, "Governor, I'm concerned that it's going to end up in a lawsuit, and it's going to be enjoined." And that's what happened. It's been enjoined. So if I'm a small Medicap pharmacy owner, I actually kind of got the worst of the outcomes there. The best outcome would have been take the darned amendment, right? Because you would have actually gotten a dispensing fee. And now I'm not giving tactics to the business community, but if the judge actually enters her final ruling that this dispensing fee violates ERISA and other issues, that's off the table entirely. There is no dispensing fee. So you could have had a dispensing fee, but one big player thought they needed their $60 million windfall. That's what happened to that. I don't mean to be that blunt about it, and I'm sure I'm making enemies as I go along doing that. But I'm not there to make friends. I'm there to make good policy. That's if I lose because I make good policy in re-election, I'm okay. I can live with that. Then the next thing on that was just arguing that it's going to be enjoined. Then the next best result could have been just let it die for the year. Either veto it or let it sit. We'll come back, we'll revisit it, we'll try to get something worked out. It probably would have included some sort of small pharmacy thing, but they were insistent, no, these small pharmacies, they're going to close this year if we don't get this. Well, guess what? The third result was the bad one. It's been enjoined. It's not going to be decided this year. You're not getting any dispensing fees this year, and you may never get them ever. So it was the worst result because they weren't willing to listen to any compromise on it. So if I sound a little salty on that one, I am. I lost a lot of sleep on that one. I lost a lot of time I mean lost. I expended a lot of time on that. But I think I understand an issue better. So that's kind of if you kind of big three issues that I think were business wise that one was ostensibly a loss, but a judge stepped in and helped thanks to the lawsuit filed by ABI and others. Issues we didn't tackle yet that we obviously need property tax reform. That is a Gordian's knot, and it's not as simple as some people say. Well, let's just eliminate the property tax. I would love to be able to eliminate the property tax, but we also made a big push both before I was in session in the legislature and during it to become one of the lowest income tax properties in the states. We have a flat fee, 3.8%. Last I knew, that put us at fifth lowest in the country of states that have an income tax. We keep talking about trying to get to a zero income tax. Well, if you get to zero income tax and zero property tax, then sales tax is the only way to make up all the difference to run all the things that runs. And we could scale back. We could do that, but and we need to do more. But if people are driving on bad roads, they're not going to like that. If their schools are failing, they're not going to like that. So if they don't have police and fire, they're not going to like that. So it's not as simple as just eliminate the property tax. But we need to do something there, and it needs to include some significant individual property tax, individual property owner tax reform this time as well. And so we'll be dealing with that. I don't know what that looks like. It may have some elements of the last iteration of a bill that came out. I'm sure some of that will be in there, but I'm not so sure. We're not really just kind of looking at the drawing board and trying to figure it out. And then I've got a pet issue on regulatory reform. I told you that's one of my pet issues. You may have heard of something called the Chevron doctrine nationally from a 1970s court case that had Chevron oil involved. And that was the case where a lot of authority was given to regulatory agencies to make law, basically, at a federal level. And so this is where you get, Waters of the USA Act impacting people disparately. And that's, we've seen a scaling back of this nationally, even with different parties in the administration, just because of the pushback. We've seen scaling back of some of this sort of mindset. We need a lot more of it. And this last year, the Chevron doctrine, where it let the regulatory agencies basically make a lot of law, was scaled way back and said, no, you can't do that. You can't be doing that anymore. Legislators make law and set policy. Executive branch implements established law and policy. That's now the new anti-Chevron doctrine. Well, before that was even decided, although the case was pending to overturn it. 3 years now, I've introduced a bill that's twice made it through the House, one time unanimously, 97-0. Even one of my Democrat lawyer colleagues, he said, in the Judiciary Committee, he said, this is one of the best pieces of legislation I've seen in all my years up here. And that was Rick Olson, who's been there a long time. So I wouldn't use that in the Senate. I don't think it helped me get it passed when I said Rick Olson said this. Lesson learned, it didn't help me in the Senate. I like Rick. He and I get along great, but when you have strong majorities in each party, each chamber, that didn't necessarily help. I thought it was being helpful. But my version of our version of a Chevron doctrine here is, I don't think we as a legislature just whole scale hand off all that power. Well, there's still too much. We still need to watch it. And I'm always raising that question when we're passing bills. How much regulatory authority are we giving here? But we have a different version here where we have a lot of judges, and this near and dear to my heart. Brad knows I've been involved in judicial reform for a lot of years too, which my bar association loves me on most issues, not on all issues, but on most issues. And so we have some judges, for example. It'll work like this. We set the law, governor signs a bill, it becomes law. Agencies make regulations as part of that routine course. And so they get to determine, and sometimes they actually have to interpret the law to make sure filling in gaps and things happens. And then you're a business owner or an individual, whatever, and they say you crossed the line and you violated the law as determined by the regulations. So then they're going to fine you or whatever comes with that. Then you appeal that, and your appeal is to an administrative law judge, which is a a judge, part-time judge, who works for the agency that determine what the law says. So of course their ALJ almost always says, yes, I agree with my boss that the law says what my boss said the law says. And so the cards are really stacked against businesses and individuals in this case when they're trying to appeal an administrative agency's determination of what the law means. So you've had your hearing, they determine facts. That's a determination of facts. And there's a determination of the law. And then you decide you're going to appeal that to district court. What we have far too often in our state is district court judges. And we know, let's go back to Schoolhouse Rock and our high school days of elementary and high school days of what we learned about the division of powers in government. It's the job of the judiciary branch to apply and interpret the laws. It's not the job of the executive branch to interpret the laws in the end. We have far too many judges who will say, well, there's already been a hearing on this, so I'm going to defer to the experts on what not only the facts that the parties found or agreed to, but also what the law says. And my Bible would say, no. You're the judiciary. You have to do what we call in law, I hate legalese, but we call it de novo or of the new. You have to do a new hearing on what the law means, because that's your job, judge. Do your job, darn it, and step up and you determine what the law means. And you can defer on the facts. You don't have to retry the whole thing and add all the facts, but on the law, we want judges and the judiciary determining what the law means, not unelected bureaucrats who weren't even necessarily appointed, at least in the judiciary. Ultimately, we can get to the Supreme Court that's been appointed by people who've been elected. But beyond that, we got some nameless, faceless bureaucrat determining what the law means, and that he or she should not be the final arbiter on that. So that's kind of one of my bills that I keep harping on, and I've gotten it twice through. I'm optimistic that next year's the year it's going to happen. And I was teasing one of my colleagues in the Senate who's been kind of a holdup on it, and I keep saying, well, what don't you like? I'm willing to work on things. What can we change? And to him, I said, before the first time I proposed it was before Chevron decision, the new Chevron decision had come out. I said, well, Iowa would be like the first or second state to do this kind of thing as a state. If we do this, we can lead. We can be Iowans like we often do on issues. We can lead on this issue or we can follow. Because you and I both know, this is also a lawyer legislator. So you and I both know that Chevron is about to be overturned if we wait too long. And then other states are going to get on the bandwagon. And so we can lead or we can follow. And then Chevron got decided, it's not Chevron, but it got decided. And then a couple other states have done, a few other states have done this sort of thing now. And so I looked at him and I said, well, now we're followers, but can we follow now? And so I think we're going to get that done. But anyway, I've rambled a lot. I'm happy to take questions. I'm sure there are issues on the minds of some folks here. If I've said things that have offended anybody, I'm sorry. I do try to. I think I've got a reputation up there of you can hate my policies, my ideas. You can even question my analysis, but I don't think. Usually, I try to keep my integrity. That I can't be questioned on that. And I think I have a reputation for listening to people, even if I know from the outset that we're not going to agree on this issue. I want that perspective. I want to understand. And I love some of the colleagues I have up there. I actually love having lawyer legislators up there of both parties because I can set them down without a personal fight, right? So, if Brad there was one of my lawyer legislators, well, I do this with Rick Olson. I'll say, Rick, I think you're wrong. Help me understand the perspective here. What's the problem? And so I want to understand the perspective because sometimes we actually improve about bill by listening to the opposition. And so I think that's important, but that comes in the lobby. It comes elsewhere. I'm sure there's some up there who think I never listen to them because I just don't take their ideas, but I actually am always listening. It's dangerous. You can ask my wife. I come up with these ideas. Sometimes she says, why are we doing this? Because I listened to you when you didn't think I was, and you kept saying, so I listen, and it does filter in, and even through my thick German skull sometimes, and it gets in there sometimes. So groups like you are important to this. Employers like you are important to this, and I love to get the input. So happy to answer questions or anything like that.
Well, we appreciate your passion, Representative, and thanks for your leadership, particularly on the pharmacy price control law and all the work that you did there. And so, if anybody wants to unmute and ask Representative Gustav a question, feel free to do so at this moment in time.
while we're waiting, Bill, I want to thank you. We did not script anything, but the presentation that Bill just gave you, if you compare that to the policy priorities of ABI this past session, we lined them up through our board of directors on tax policy, and Bill nailed it on property taxes and what we need to do going forward. The workforce was our second priority, and that was the pharmacy benefit manager bill was the biggest thing to come under the workforce area. And ABI's third priority is a constant priority, which is regulatory relief. And of course, Bill has just described to you exactly how he puts himself right in the middle of that discussion. So really very pleased to have Bill speak with us today, because he's a 3-for-3 legislator for us, and we really appreciate that.
We're not always aligned on every issue, but
No,
generally I find
no, I
myself.
don't want to convey
Well,
that. And
I would say the vast, frankly, almost every issue, I find myself in line with the ABIs and the NFIBs and, business folks. So,
and we appreciate that. Anybody have a question for Representative Gustoff?
it's your chance to stump the chump.
Let's see. We got something in the chat here from. Let's see. Since the litigation is talking about the pharmacy price control law, since that is in litigation and not likely to be decided this year, where is it going to be going next? Where do we see commercial property tax headed next year as well?
I don't see. Okay, let's take that second one first. I don't know what we're going to see on property tax reform. Obviously, it was the number one issue I heard in the last election cycle at the doors. If anybody brought up an issue organically, property tax was the number one issue by far. Both parties people were saying that. But one of the frustrating things for me is that the state gets almost zero of any revenue in property taxes. It's all driven by state or by local spending. So it's cities, counties, school boards, community colleges, and some of those other agencies out there. So we keep doing things we feel at a state level to deal with property tax reform, and they've gone up. They keep going up faster than the rate of inflation. So when they argue inflation, it's just not. That's not accurate. They're going up faster than the rate of inflation and faster than the rate of growth. And so we're going to tackle something there. It's probably going to come with some sort of price cap or spending caps. I know it makes cities and counties very mad, but copy a phrase from a friend of mine. One of my current law partners is also he's now heads up Iowans for tax relief, so we never see him as in law practice anymore. But he likes to say, the only way to do this is control spending, and the only way you can do that is to take away the credit card. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to probably look at some level of that. I don't see, at least from a state, we're not gonna do anything to raise your property taxes. I don't think. We're gonna try to do things to help control the increase in property taxes, and that's gonna be some sort of spending cap involved, I think. And otherwise, it's pretty hard for us to do a lot on that beyond those sorts of things. We do things with transparency. I had a couple bills. One this last year, we didn't run it, but it would have been more of a transparency piece, because I think even what we've done has improved it. But I'm a lawyer. I used to do property tax appeals way back in the day. I get that new form. I have to puzzle to decipher the hieroglyphics in that form that's supposed to be the transparency piece. So we need to improve that. And I'm going to look to a very blue state of Minnesota, who actually has a pretty good thing that they send out that's comprehensible by the average taxpayer. And so I was talking with Jane Bloomingdale, head of state government, on that. She saw my bill and she wondered if I wanted my bill to run, and she was explaining something. I said, I like that, Jane. I want transparency. I think that's a big piece of it. If you as the taxpayer had to get answers from your locals on how they're spending your money, you can understand it. That's where you're going to have some pushback locally. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but we're not going to do anything at the state level that's going to be intended to raise your taxes. Quite the opposite on property taxes and income taxes. The PBM bill, it's a good point you raised there, because the other piece of that was, you remember I said the best option I thought would have been to take the compromise. Second best would have been, let's shelve this thing and come back to it next year. And the third would be, it might end up in an injunction. I mean, I guess their best path would have been force through their bill and and it doesn't get enjoined. But guess what? They were wrong. It got enjoined. So, um, so here's what happens. You saw this with not biz, but on uh, uh, abortion and pro-life issues. You saw this happen. That while a lawsuit is pending, the legislature won't take up an issue at all. So I predict next year PBMs that maybe nothing is happening with PBM reform law next year because this lawsuit, the swift wheels of justice, I don't see this lawsuit being decided before session starts. And so we definitely won't take it up while there's an injunction pending. Just like we did with the heartbeat bill. We didn't take up a heartbeat bill again until there was a lawsuit decided on it. Um, and then we're not unlikely to take up any alternative version of it until we see what the court says on the law that's already on the books. So I just don't see it going forward next year. I don't, you guys have a different take on that?
Well, Bill, you perfectly led us into our next phase of of what we're going to talk about today, laying out some of the key issues from the perspective of ABI. So, really want to thank you for this today. Fascinating, your take on things. So we really appreciate that very much, and thank you, Representative. Let me go ahead, Brad, and get us going then on to the next slide here. We're going to give you the review kind of from the staff level now on the pharmacy price control bill. And Representative Gustav is correct. This is now no longer a legislative issue. This is a legal issue in front of the federal courts. And so where things stand today, Bill highlighted it. Judge Rose has enjoined the bill from being enforced, portions of the bill from being enforced on ABI members and the other litigants that filed. It's a narrow ruling because that's the new standard from the U.S. Supreme Court, that you have very narrow enjoinders, if you will, when people are doing this. The state of Iowa has then appealed that to the appeals court, saying that they'd like to have that court review the injunction that was given by the district court. And we also have now requirements that, and then this goes to Bill's timeline, that nothing will happen soon. It's September is the deadline for the first filings that are going to be required by the courts for the next steps of the litigation. So that is the status there. We agree that there's really no way to find a solution that we know won't violate federal law until the 10th Circuit Court has made its determination. There are similar lawsuits that are going on in the 8th Circuit. And so you could even have a situation where the Supreme Court needs to get involved if the 8th and the 10th Circuits rule differently. So we'll be watching that. If you are an ABI member and if you've been looking at your weekly newsletters, any new updates on what the court timeline is or any decisions that are made, we are quick to get those out to membership. But for right now, ABI has an entire wing separate from our public policy team of myself and Brad that are executing on the litigation strategy. Property tax reform from ABI's perspective, we are encouraging the legislature to be as bold as they need to be to get something done. We realize that the problems of the property tax were built over time, and it's going to take something really to kind of tip the card over to get things done right. One principle we've asked the legislature to follow, we've met with the Ways and Means chairs of both chambers, leadership as well, pressing on this point, and that is that we think that changes to the property tax system need to kind of respect all classes of property. We had a question in the chat about what's going to happen with commercial property. Our first goal up there is to make sure that there are no rebalancing within the classes of property to try to afford a property tax relief for one class of property at the expense of another. So we've been very pleased that all iterations of all three bills that were introduced this last year did provide that kind of a respect for the classes of property. And that'll be our goal going forward. I'll let you do the next two, Brad.
Thank you, JD. Representative Gustav highlighted the next two issues as well, one of those being Senate File 607, which is unemployment insurance premium reform. This was an initiative brought forward by Governor Reynolds, and Iowa has handled the issue of unemployment insurance and our unemployment insurance trust fund extraordinarily well compared to almost every other state in the country since COVID first hit. We took several actions over the last few years that brought us to this point in time where we're able to cut tax rates for unemployment. And so, what the bill did was cut the taxable wage base in half. So this year, employers pay a specific tax rate over about $40,000 of wages for each employee. That cut that in half going into next calendar year. So next year, it's going to be about $20,000. That's going to provide that $1.2 billion in relief over 5 years going forward while maintaining the sustainability of the trust fund to ensure that claimants can get the funds that they're entitled to when they're unemployed through no fault of their own. It also cut the tax rates that employers can pay. The maximum rates are brought down to federal maximums. And then it shrinks the tables and the ranks. And so it really simplifies the system there. And again, governor's leadership on this over the last several years has put us in a position where we could do a bill like this, where a lot of states are raising taxes right now on income, on unemployment, on sales tax. We're looking at cutting those, and we did that this year with unemployment. So great victory for member companies there. The fourth bullet is drug and alcohol testing reform, House File 767. And this bill is a product of ABI's public policy process being put into place. And we saw the fruit of that work this year. The biggest piece of this bill flips the burden of proof to the plaintiff to prove their case against the employer. Before this became law, an employer was presumed guilty until proven innocent if a claim was brought against them. This forced businesses to settle for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for technical violations of the law. And so this burden shifting should fix all of that. It also modernizes the communication methods for which employers and employees communicate drug and alcohol testing results. Prior to this law, employers had to utilize certified mail return receipt requested. The new law gives them the ability to do the same thing, but also offer in-person exchange or electronic exchange of testing results to the employee. The employee would still get to decide at the end of the day, but it does provide some flexibility to both parties. And so this is the biggest overhaul of this part of Iowa law since the 1990s when it was first put into the statute. So we were very pleased that just got done this year, and it should make it a bit easier to administer a program if your business does that.
Thanks, Brad. I just want to kind of let everybody know it looks like we may go just a few minutes over, so apologize for that. But as we're winding down, we want to kind of remind you of what our policy process is, where we are in things. This is the fourth out of five of our regional policy committee meetings, where we've given our final readouts on the 25 legislative session, and we're beginning the process of getting ready for 2026. And that's really going to be highlighted by 5 public policy committee meetings that will be held starting next week and throughout August, and then a convening of our legislative committee, which oversees that process. And finally, our board of directors will be meeting to give Brad and I our direction on our top priorities and endorsing each of the policies that has been developed by you, our members. And so really, we want to give you an invitation now for that public policy process. So you'll see these are starting just next week on August 5th, workplace and product safety. We need your ideas on workers' compensation, tort reform. Bill mentioned he's run a bill and he's looking forward to doing more. We need your issue experts from your companies to show up and help us guide ourselves through the development of that policy. In the Employment and Workforce Committee, we are really working on a lot of the barriers to employment, childcare, and training, the unemployment issues, and healthcare. Those are all underneath there. This is where you need your HR experts and some of your community building people to be involved when it comes to childcare and other things. Our Environment Committee is very, very busy throughout the year. We are going to have a presentation there where we're going to learn just how tenuous our federal funding streams are. We need to make sure that you have your environment people there because we need to be thinking about whether or not we're going to have more pressure on businesses to be paying for the cost of their regulation and how we would work on that. So send your experts. The Economic Growth Committee probably has the broadest portfolio of our committees. all the way from, supporting education initiatives to the incentives for tax incentives for businesses, transportation. We have an active kind of study of our energy policy to see if that needs any tuning. So we need our community builders and those folks, your experts from your groups there. And then finally, the tax group, it will be dominated undoubtedly by talk of property taxes, but also we're going to be having a presentation to us about what are the effects going to be on the state of Iowa with the federal action on the big, beautiful bill. We have a rolling conformity policy in Iowa. That means that it'll be good for employers to enjoy both federal and state tax treatment that will be similar because of the federal action, but it'll also have an impact on state revenues and what will the reaction be to the budget folks in the state of Iowa. So this is where we can really try to take control of managing those changes coming back. So we are looking for your input there. And if at this point, if there's anybody that has a takeaway to give us on any one of these issues we've mentioned, that you just want to put a placeholder to make sure that we get it to our policy committees, we'll open it up now for anybody that would like to make a suggestion. So we'll give you a pause for a minute. Okay, and I think Brad is going to give you some contact information and how to get involved. But at the end of that, there are email addresses that you'll want to use to pass along any of that information. So please go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, thank you, JD. He just talked about the public policy meetings taking place this coming month, so feel free to sign up for those on our website. We have a golf outing at Glen Oaks Country Club, and at the end of August, that's always a great event. Our Elevated Advanced Manufacturing Tour in October. This is something new that we're doing. It's an RV tour. We're going to be visiting manufacturers across the state and introducing students and job seekers to great employers and a lot of fine communities across the state of Iowa. So that's going to be a lot of fun doing that. That will culminate with the Iowa Manufacturing Conference in Altoona on the 14th. That usually brings in 200 to 300 people. You'll want to come to that. That's workshops, that's key speakers, all things manufacturing. Legislative briefing and reception. Many of you have attended this in the past. This is our premier public policy event. It kind of starts off the year where JD and I brief members about what we see happening in the legislature, and then you have a chance to interact with your local policymakers. So make sure you take advantage of that. And finally, Business Day in Des Moines. This is going to be in March. This took place for our Business Day in Des Moines event. We're going to be bringing Governor Reynolds, other folks, majority leaders and minority leaders of both parties and both chambers to you so that you can hear from them during a key point of session. So be sure to attend that one. And then finally, the best way to get involved actually is developing a relationship with your local legislator. Have them over to your business, have coffee, have lunch, attend a forum that they have during session, and establish that relationship. That is critical as we go forward. And then you can stay connected with us on social media. You can see the information there. And then our email addresses are there. If you have any questions following this presentation, feel free to ping JD or I anytime and we can try to answer that. And we'll do one more ask for any questions or comments before we let you go for the day. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate you taking time to be with us and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.